It was a peaceful, early evening in Brentwood, Tennessee, one of those serene southern suburbs known for sprawling homes and neatly manicured lawns. The sunlight cast gentle shadows across streets lined with grand, well-kept houses. Porch lights softly flickered on, signaling families settling in for the night. Everything felt familiar and safe, the very essence of the American dream, a community rooted in tradition and comfort. Regina Owens drove slowly through these familiar streets in her sleek black Audi Q7, heading home after a quiet dinner alone. At age 65, Regina appreciated the calm routine of these drives, each street corner memorized, each turn second nature. Her husband, Samuel, the respected director of the FBI, was traveling on official business, leaving her with a rare evening to herself. She adjusted her delicate gold bracelet, reflecting the fading daylight, and gently sighed. Life had taught Regina many lessons, some joyous, some harsh, and one she never forgot was to stay alert, even in places where safety seemed certain. And so, when the sudden flashing of blue and red lights illuminated her rearview mirror, Regina felt a familiar heaviness settle in her chest. Not fear exactly, but a weary sense of resignation she'd known too many times before. Calmly, she guided the Audi to the curb, feeling the soft crunch of gravel beneath her tires as she parked under the warm amber glow of a street lamp. Regina instinctively reached into her purse, retrieved her phone, and quietly activated the recording function. It wasn't that she anticipated trouble tonight, but life had taught her never to rely solely on others' accounts of events, especially in situations like these. Glancing again in the rearview mirror, she watched as Officer Ethan Caldwell stepped slowly from his patrol car. Caldwell was a man in his late 40s, tall and broad-shouldered, his bearing radiating an authority that came from 2 decades on the force. His uniform was immaculate, his badge catching the streetlight, gleaming with unmistakable pride and power. As he walked toward her vehicle, one hand rested casually near his holster. Regina felt her pulse quicken slightly, not out of fear, but frustration. "Here we go," she whispered to herself, the words tinged with quiet resolve. She kept both hands visible on the steering wheel, waiting calmly as Caldwell deliberately approached her window, his boots making steady, purposeful steps. Regina glanced at the houses nearby, homes filled with neighbors who trusted the badge approaching her door, neighbors who perhaps couldn't imagine what it felt like to be stopped simply for driving while black in an affluent neighborhood. Tonight felt different, though. The air around her carried a strange weight, a tension building slowly like storm clouds gathering on the horizon. Regina took a steadying breath, preparing herself. She'd been here before, too many times to count, but something in her gut whispered that tonight was not going to be routine. In the fading light, as Officer Caldwell reached her window and leaned down, Regina met his gaze head-on, ready for whatever was about to unfold. Officer Ethan Caldwell paused just behind Regina's driver's side window, forcing her to lean slightly upward to meet his gaze. His stance was deliberate, authoritative, a posture shaped by 2 decades of wearing the uniform. "License and registration," he demanded flatly, his voice carrying a detached authority devoid of warmth. Regina kept her hands carefully placed on the leather steering wheel of her Audi, palms clearly visible. Experience had long taught her the importance of cautious movements, especially in situations like this. She met the officer's eyes evenly, her voice firm yet respectful, carrying the measured calm of someone accustomed to keeping composure. "May I ask why you pulled me over, officer?" Caldwell's expression shifted subtly, his eyes narrowing, clearly displeased with being questioned. He spoke deliberately, almost dismissively. "You failed to signal at that last intersection." A flicker of irritation stirred inside Regina, though outwardly she remained composed. She knew these streets intimately, she'd driven this exact route thousands of times over the years, and was certain she had signaled. Nevertheless, she nodded gently, offering no resistance at this point. Arguing now, she knew, would serve no purpose. "All right," she responded slowly, carefully maintaining neutrality in her tone. "My license and registration are in my purse. I'll reach for them now, okay?" Caldwell didn't respond immediately. Instead, his eyes slowly roamed over her face, her clothing, lingering momentarily on the tasteful gold bracelet encircling her wrist, the tailored cut of her blazer, her manicured fingernails. The corners of his mouth curled slightly, forming a small, unsettling smirk. "Go ahead, but slowly." Regina felt her jaw tighten instinctively, yet she moved with careful deliberation. Her movements were slow, obvious, and tended to convey cooperation clearly. After extracting the documents, she handed them carefully through the window, her gaze steady. Caldwell took them but didn't immediately inspect them, choosing instead to let silence hang awkwardly in the air, heightening the discomfort between them. Finally, he glanced at her driver's license, eyebrows rising subtly in what appeared to be mild surprise, or perhaps skepticism. "You live around here?" he asked, feigning casual interest, the kind of tone typically reserved for polite conversation at church socials or grocery checkout lines. Regina felt her patience thin further. "Yes," she replied calmly, firmly, her voice betraying none of the frustration quietly building within. "About 2 miles down the road." Caldwell clicked his tongue lightly, exaggerated curiosity coloring his tone. "Really?" he asked, glancing again at her address, then back at her. "What brings you this way tonight?" At that question, something deeper within Regina stirred, a carefully controlled anger, accumulated patiently over decades of navigating a world that frequently questioned her presence in places others accepted without thought. She inhaled slowly, steadying herself, letting her reply carry both dignity and a subtle edge. "Officer, I wasn't aware I needed a reason to drive through my own neighborhood." The faint smirk vanished instantly from Caldwell's face, replaced by something colder, sharper, more openly confrontational. He leaned closer, voice dropping dangerously. "Ma'am, I'm just doing my job." Regina responded swiftly, decisively, cutting directly through his thin veil of authority. "No, officer, you're not." Her words landed like a sudden strike, sharp and unexpected. Caldwell visibly stiffened, his body tensing as if preparing for confrontation. Regina noticed, with a quiet chill, the subtle shift of his fingers inching closer to the holster on his hip. "You'd better watch that attitude," Caldwell warned softly, the threat unmistakable beneath his controlled tone. "You're making this situation harder than it needs to be." Regina held his gaze without blinking, sensing clearly the dangerous line they were now approaching. Her heart beat steadily, though slightly faster than before, the tension thickening inside the quiet comfort of her luxury SUV. She refused to allow intimidation to silence her. With careful control, she spoke again, evenly but deliberately. "And exactly how am I making this harder, Officer Caldwell?" He stared back at her, momentarily silent, the confrontation now fully palpable between them. After a tense, lingering pause, Caldwell abruptly turned away, gripping her license and registration tightly, deliberately prolonging the moment of power he still held. Regina watched him stride purposefully back toward his patrol car, his movements stiff and controlled. She exhaled slowly, trying to release some of the tension that had coiled tightly in her chest. Yet she knew instinctively that the encounter was far from over. As the neighborhood remained quiet, unaware of the storm brewing on their own familiar streets, Regina braced herself, waiting patiently, ready to face whatever Caldwell had in store next. From the seat of her luxury Audi SUV, Regina Owens felt the tension thicken, each heartbeat sounding louder in her ears. Officer Caldwell sat in his patrol car behind her, deliberately delaying his next move. Time seemed to slow beneath the fading twilight sky, and Regina knew deep inside that this was no ordinary traffic stop. Finally, Caldwell stepped out again. This time, his movements were slower, more deliberate, every footstep echoing clearly on the pavement as he approached her car. His expression was unreadable, but the authority and confidence were tinged now with a simmering anger. Regina lowered her window slightly, steadying her breathing, her pulse quickening despite her outward calmness. "Everything all right, officer?" she asked evenly, meeting his gaze without flinching. Caldwell leaned slightly against her car door, his fingers drumming rhythmically on the metal frame, his tone calm yet weighted with threat. "You seem awfully anxious to leave." "Got somewhere important to be?" Home, she replied simply, maintaining control, her voice gentle yet firm. Caldwell let silence settle briefly before speaking again, his words chosen carefully to deliver maximum sting. Funny, he remarked coldly, letting his eyes wander over her once more, deliberately and slowly. You don't exactly look like someone who lives around here. Regina felt a rush of cold anger ripple through her veins. The subtle accusation, one she'd faced countless times, now openly laid bare. She drew a steadying breath, her voice clear, sharp, and dignified. And you don't look like a cop who follows proper procedure. Her words pierced through the quiet evening air, causing Caldwell's confident smirk to falter. He straightened sharply, visibly irritated, jaw clenched tight, eyes flashing with barely contained anger. His hand shifted subtly toward his holster, and Regina's heart slammed briefly in her chest. Step out of the vehicle, he ordered abruptly, his voice no longer pretending at politeness. Regina didn't move, gripping the steering wheel tighter. Her voice was firm, unwavering. On what grounds, officer? Caldwell straightened further, his body language more openly confrontational now. His hand remained poised near the grip of his weapon, deliberately menacing. Do I really need to spell it out for you? Regina felt a chill run down her spine, knowing precisely where this was headed. Carefully, she raised her phone, making certain he could see the recording symbol clearly illuminated. I'm recording this encounter, she announced firmly, her voice carrying beyond their immediate space, audible to neighbors who had begun stepping outside, watching cautiously from porches and sidewalks. Caldwell chuckled dismissively, cold and humorless. Lady, you think that scares me? You have any idea how many times I've heard that? His hand slowly moved closer to his holster, fingers brushing the handle of his firearm. Regina's breathing slowed, steadying herself as she spoke louder, purposefully, ensuring those nearby could clearly hear her voice. Badge number, officer? His jaw tightened visibly, hesitation flickering briefly in his eyes. He repeated sharply, voice rising with impatience, I said step out, now. Regina refused to yield, her posture calm and defiant, knowing exactly what she needed to say next. I'll step out, she replied clearly, intentionally projecting her words for everyone to hear, after you call your supervisor and inform him that you've pulled over the wife of the FBI director. Her words hit Caldwell like an invisible blow, visibly shattering his facade of arrogant control. His expression shifted instantly from anger to stunned disbelief. Regina watched carefully, seeing his fingers tremble slightly as he froze, hand hovering uncertainly over his weapon. Across the street, neighbors murmured softly in surprise, some openly recording the unfolding scene. Caldwell's eyes darted nervously, the reality of his grave miscalculation dawning upon him. A single misstep had transformed what he had seen as a routine assertion of power into an unmistakable career-ending crisis. Regina sat motionless, heart pounding steadily, as the air thickened with anticipation. The balance of power had irrevocably shifted, and as Caldwell stood frozen, suspended between aggression and fear, she knew unequivocally that everything had changed. As the evening grew darker, Officer Ethan Caldwell stood frozen beside Regina Owens's vehicle, the air heavy with tension. Neighbors, who minutes earlier were quietly preparing for a peaceful evening at home, now stood watching from front porches, sidewalks, and driveways. Several had their cell phones out, silently recording the dramatic confrontation unfolding under the glow of nearby streetlights. Officer Caldwell, lower your weapon immediately. The firm voice belonged to Sergeant Raymond Briggs, a seasoned police supervisor known throughout Brentwood for his integrity. He had arrived swiftly after a concerned neighbor called the police department directly. Briggs stepped forward quickly, his authority unmistakable. Holster your firearm now, Ethan. Caldwell's breathing was shallow, uneven. Reluctantly, his fingers loosened their tight grip on the gun, carefully placing it back into its holster. His shoulders sagged slightly, visibly shaken, his earlier confidence now replaced by raw uncertainty. Sergeant Briggs approached Regina's window carefully, his expression solemn and genuinely concerned. Ma'am, are you all right? He asked respectfully, leaning slightly toward the vehicle. Regina's composure remained steady, her voice calm yet tinged with a quiet intensity born from decades of careful dignity. "I'm unharmed, Sergeant," she replied clearly, her gaze fixed steadily on Caldwell. "But I would like my license and registration returned." Briggs turned sharply to Caldwell, extending a hand expectantly. Ethan fumbled awkwardly for a moment, then reluctantly retrieved Regina's documents from his pocket. He handed them over stiffly, unable to meet Briggs's gaze, embarrassment etched plainly across his face. "Mrs. Owens," Briggs continued respectfully, clearly understanding the seriousness of the situation, "would you like to file a formal complaint against Officer Caldwell?" Regina took a slow breath, feeling the weight of decades of similar experiences press upon her heart. The moment held profound significance, not only for herself, but for many others who hadn't had the chance or courage to speak up. She nodded slowly yet decisively. "Yes, Sergeant, I want this incident formally documented. Accountability matters." Sergeant Briggs gave an immediate, affirming nod. Turning directly to Caldwell, his voice now sharp and authoritative, he issued clear orders that resonated deeply through the gathered crowd. "Officer Caldwell, effective immediately, you are relieved of duty pending investigation by Internal Affairs. Hand over your badge and firearm immediately." Ethan Caldwell's face drained of remaining color. His fingers trembled slightly as he unclipped the badge he had worn proudly for more than 2 decades, and he removed his standard-issue Glock 17 from its holster. Both items felt heavy in his hands as he surrendered them reluctantly to Briggs. To Caldwell, each step felt surreal, a stark reminder of how swiftly the power and authority he had wielded could vanish. The humbling exchange unfolded in full view of neighbors, many of whom had known Caldwell as a fixture of the community. Sergeant Briggs turned again to Regina, his voice respectful and sincere. "On behalf of the Brentwood Police Department, Mrs. Owens, please accept my deepest apologies for what you've experienced tonight. This is not who we are, and it will be fully addressed." Regina acknowledged Briggs with a gracious nod, appreciating his immediate and genuine response. She looked around at the neighbors, their expressions a mix of relief, support, and quiet solidarity. She knew many here were witnessing firsthand an uncomfortable truth they might previously have denied existed in their quiet neighborhood. With a controlled dignity, Regina addressed Briggs once more. "Sergeant, I trust your department to handle this fairly. But this incident cannot be forgotten or swept away. It needs to stand as a clear reminder." Briggs replied solemnly, "Understood completely, Mrs. Owens. Justice will be served." Caldwell, now stripped of his authority, quietly retreated, his footsteps slow and unsteady as he returned to his cruiser one final time. His departure from the scene was subdued, marked by disbelief and shame, as neighbors stood quietly watching, witnesses to a critical turning point in their community. As the crowd slowly dispersed, Regina sat silently for a moment longer in her Audi, exhaling a long-held breath. She felt the quiet strength of generations who had faced similar confrontations and understood the significance of this evening's events. Tonight, justice hadn't just prevailed, it had spoken clearly, unmistakably, reminding everyone present that no position or badge could place a person above the law. Driving slowly homeward under a sky now filled with stars, Regina felt hopeful, recognizing that tonight's events might spark meaningful conversations around dinner tables and church gatherings in Brentwood and beyond. Accountability, after all, wasn't just about punishing wrongdoing, it was about paving a path toward a community that valued respect and dignity for all. As Regina Owens arrived home later that evening, the quiet stillness of her comfortable Brentwood home seemed more profound than ever. Settling into the familiar embrace of her favorite chair, she reflected deeply on what had just transpired. Her encounter with Officer Caldwell was more than a personal confrontation, it was a powerful reminder about the deeper truths that many people across America faced every day. For decades, Regina had navigated through subtle moments of prejudice, an uncomfortable glance here, an unwarranted suspicion there. Each incident had been a quiet battle, often unnoticed or misunderstood by those who had never walked in her shoes. Yet tonight had brought everything clearly and painfully into focus, not just for her, but for her neighbors who witnessed a stark injustice unfold in their peaceful community. The heart of the matter was simple yet profound. Authority comes with profound responsibility. Regina's experience highlighted a troubling truth that some in positions of power occasionally forget, that a badge or title does not grant immunity from accountability or excuse prejudice. Officer Caldwell's actions represented more than one man's mistake. They reflected a larger issue that communities everywhere must courageously confront. For Regina, a lifelong believer in American principles of justice and fairness, tonight reinforced her conviction that speaking up in the face of injustice is both necessary and patriotic. It's what generations before her had bravely done, laying the foundation for the progress America had made. Her actions weren't driven by anger or resentment, but by the firm belief that accountability strengthens the bonds that unite communities, reinforcing trust in institutions meant to protect and serve everyone equally. Yet Regina knew her privilege as the wife of the FBI director had played a significant role in achieving swift justice. Others without her connections, ordinary men and women driving home through neighborhoods just like hers, had too often remained unheard or unseen. That realization carried a sobering responsibility. Her voice had power, and tonight she chose to use it not just for herself, but for countless others who might never experience justice firsthand. As evening faded into a calm Tennessee night, Regina felt an enduring sense of hope. The quiet courage shown by neighbors who recorded the incident, the sincere response of Sergeant Briggs, and the swift accountability faced by Officer Caldwell demonstrated something encouraging. Communities were capable of recognizing injustice and responding decisively when truth was clearly seen. Regina believed deeply that America's greatest strength had always been its ability to face uncomfortable truths openly. At 65, she understood this profoundly. While America had evolved greatly since her youth, stories like hers reminded everyone that work still needed to be done. Conversations sparked by such incidents, though difficult, were essential for progress. That evening, Regina Owens reaffirmed a timeless message that resonated deeply, especially for those who had lived long enough to witness history unfold. True justice is achieved only when good people, united by decency and moral courage, choose to stand against injustice whenever and wherever it occurs. Life continually reminds us that authority must always be accompanied by responsibility. No matter who you are or what your position in society is, no one stands above justice or human dignity. As people who've witnessed decades of history, we understand this deeply. Each of us possesses a unique strength, the strength found in dignity, integrity, and the courage to speak up for what is right. When witnessing injustice, no matter how seemingly small, speak out clearly. Silence often becomes acceptance, allowing wrongdoing to persist. Never underestimate the value of your voice because of age. On the contrary, our experiences and wisdom earned over the years equip us to guide younger generations, reinforcing the moral and humane values that have always defined our country. Remember, when we bravely confront and correct today's injustices, we're building a fairer, kinder tomorrow for those we love. This responsibility is perhaps the greatest gift we, as seniors, can pass along to future generations.